We are very fortunate to have Jeff Passan here, not in a suit. And
Yeah, did you steal my outfit?
you know what? This is my wedding suit, first of all. So the fact that I wore your wedding suit, sorry, your suit for my wedding is something else. But I would just
Looks like
think
my bar
that
mitzvah suit, but
maybe Jeff would, try to match me after last year where he wore a hoodie. And look at this again, a hoodie. Jared Diamond, you know what? I have seen you in this green shirt for PitchCon before. I believe I have. It's a great shirt.
This is my PitchCon shirt. All right.
It is a good one. And Travis, can you tell us the designer that you're wearing today?
Well, I also only own one suit, so I'm right there with you, Nick. Only for special occasions.
Oh man,
Lululemon hoodie.
Very, very serious topic that all of you have talked about, and I felt it was something that we need to discuss and not just have as elf in the room and everybody just saying, "Oh, this is happening, this is happening." Really get our facts straight, understand how this is affecting teams in the preseason right now, in the offseason with their signings. Entering the year, it's going to be constantly this haze over the season, and let's just be on the same page, everyone, of what it could mean entering 2027. So Jared Diamond, Jeff Passan, Travis Sawchik, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this. And let's just go straight here. I know, Jeff, you put out an article at ESPN really laying out the facts in an incredible way. And I hope that you can just quickly summarize a little bit just what is exactly the problem here. And, there's a CBA expiring December 1st, 2026. And what is the real issue that could actually prevent everyone just signing the paper and doing this all over again?
I can't promise you, Nick, that I'm going to be quick, but I will do my absolute best. The sport is governed by the collective bargaining agreement, which is between two parties: Major League Baseball, which looks out for all the interests of the 30 teams, and the Major League Baseball Players Association, which covers the 1,200 players on 40-man rosters, as well now as minor leaguers with a separate bargaining unit. And what this does is it essentially governs the entire sport. It gives a system through which everything is done, from transactions all the way down to revenue sharing and so on. And, there's always contention, right? That's inherent in any sort of management labor conversation. But the contention has really amped up over the last couple of years leading up to this, because MLB owners want a salary cap. They have not come out and explicitly said so. A couple of them have, but they've been very very judicious about approaching a cap publicly, because players don't want a cap. Like, players really, really do not want a salary cap. And that ultimately, I think, is what this fight is going to come down to. It's a question of just how long are owners going to hold on to this idea that a cap is an absolute must-have. They are saying it because of competitive balance reasons, and yet there's no evidence in any of the other capped leagues that competitive balance is causative from a salary cap. Could you argue that it's correlated to one? Maybe, but there are plenty of points that players make about how Major League Baseball has competitive balance right now. I think the issue is the financial disparity between the Dodgers and the Mets up at the top and everyone else beneath them. And it's clear, regardless of whether you are pro or anti-cap, that baseball's economic system right now could use a refresh and could use an overhaul, because it's not just the owners that are angry that their franchise values aren't getting higher. It's not just the players that are angry that the salary cap is being shoved down their throats against their will. It's the fans who are getting angry now. And I understand precisely why the fans are angry, because when you look at a game and when you invest in a game, all you want is fairness. Yeah, you want your team to win. Yeah, you want those great moments. But at the end of the day, all you want to do is be able to say, I feel like my team, if it were run better, would have every bit as good of an opportunity as other teams. And in baseball right now, that simply is not the case, and something that I think all parties involved need to address in a constructive way, where they start listening to each other and try and find common ground rather than run this thing into it.
Yeah, this is what's interesting too, I think about this lockout is that there is a bigger focus than it was in 2022 of that giant gap, right? Between the spending of the Dodgers. Now, what is it? It's Kyle Tucker's 1 year of 60 million is 89% of the entire Marlins payroll from last year, right?
Not just that, if I could just, I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt, but because they are taxed at 110% on that, 1 year
right.
of Kyle Tucker at a 57.1 net present value is actually $119.9 million, which is higher than the payroll of 11 big league teams right now.
Unbelievable. And, we'll go into a little bit about why the Dodgers have that much and the Marlins don't a little bit later, and maybe finding some solutions for that. But in 2022, there was a lot more about players not getting called up. We had an issue of essentially making, and Ben Lindbergh put this out really well on The Ringer, that the most valuable asset in baseball were talented, team controlled youth, right? It were the guys who were on minimum contracts for the first 3 years who were just the best players in baseball. And there was no incentive really for teams to call up guys early, to start the arbitration clock sooner, and to spend more when the most valuable thing is actually these young players. And that was more of the focus in 2022. And Jared, I want to ask you about this. When we left off in 2022 and we finally said, you know what, let's just kick the can down the road a little bit. Um, do you feel that those issues that were present then are still going to be in this one, or is this really just going to be a focus on that parity of spending?
There's no question that the spending revenue disparity, revenue gap, wealth gap, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the primary issue that we're going to be talking about for the next year, probably more. Hopefully a year. A year would be amazing. And like you talked about how you kind of raised this point of this was an issue that existed in 2022 and we're still talking about it now. The reason we're still talking about it now is that the gap has only gotten bigger, and the reason it's gotten bigger is even though 2022 doesn't feel like a long time ago, a lot has changed since 2022 in sort of the world beyond just baseball, right? There's a little like eat your vegetables to this a bit, but what's happened the last 5 years is like the TV market, the TV industry has essentially collapsed, right? For decades, baseball teams derived a very sizable chunk of their revenue from local television, RSNs, you watching your games, your team's games in the local market. And we all sort of saw it coming that, hey, that business is in trouble. The cable bundle is falling apart, cord cutting. But I don't think anyone saw it happening as fast as it's happened. So now we already have 7 clubs that don't have an RSN, that have their games produced by Major League Baseball. That group could grow by as many as 9 in the next couple of days, as the FanDuel Sports Network Consortium could literally close down, by the time we're done with this panel, the way things are looking. That would mean more than half the league doesn't have an RSN. That doesn't apply to the Dodgers. The Dodgers still have a local TV deal that pays them an average of $330 some odd million a year through 2038. There are some teams that are making literally a tenth of that in their local media. So why has the gap grown? That's why. And that's not something that could sort of easily be remedied. And I think that's a big reason of why we are where we are.
Yeah, and so Travis, I mean, when it comes to solutions for that, right? I mean, by the way, this is a personal thing, but I hear FanDuel Sports Network going under, I celebrate a little bit. But Travis, right? So with those TV deals, are there solutions? I mean, for example, revenue sharing, right, has been a thing that comes up. Like, okay, cool. The Dodgers here, they make X amount of dollars on their TV deal. Hey, we need it to make it so that there are no blackouts, that MLB has control of this, that we can make it so we get MLB.TV to watch every single game instead of this. It seem like a good solution to say to the Dodgers, like, look, you have to share that money and then force people to spend that on free agency, these teams, instead of however else they want to do it. Is that an option, Travis?
It's complicated because, as Jared pointed out, these local TV deals, your RSN deals accounted for 25%, I think, on average of team revenues, and now there's a huge disparity in those. Uh, and perhaps down the road, if the total cable model totally collapses and becomes something else, we'll have totally they'll all be national deals. It'll be MLB TV, it'll be ESPN, it'll be Netflix, something like that, and maybe that'll allow for uh, a more equitable distribution of TV revenue. So maybe that just the marketplace will create a solution, but it's complicated. Do the Dodgers don't really want to share their dollars and I'm in Cleveland, Jeff's from Cleveland. This is a market that has these teams that have lost their RSN deals, they've lost about half the replacement on average has been about 50% of what they were making. So there's that's a tough, I don't know what the solution is there. It's challenging, and you're dealing with things that are, the cable model was the golden goose, and the beauty of it was most people that were paying into cable didn't watch live sports, but everyone was paying their RSN fees. So that was beautiful. You are capturing everyone's chipping in, even those that don't watch, and that's going away. So you have to drive people more and more. You have to have a compelling product that people will sign up to pay for, especially as we all know how the streaming, all the streaming options out there too. So I wish I had a better answer. I don't really have one. I think it's just got to work its way out, and it's really a bigger than MLB problem, like the live TV ecosystem that has to unwind and find a new footing, new model.
Now, I do
yet,
wanna
and yet,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
that's the only solution, Travis, is it not? Is local media not the only place where you can forage billions of dollars and eventually distribute those equally among teams, or at least close to equally among teams? Because right now, so the way television works is you have the local, pregame, postgame, 162, spring training games, etc. And then you've got the national deal, which has postseason, all-star game, home run derby, and all of those things. And the national TV broadcasters, they want special games. Like they want Field of Dreams, they want events. We see what Netflix is willing to, pay for and put out there. And so that's one thing. If we're talking about what players can give up, players can do more to satisfy this idea of a television contract that Major League Baseball wants. But grabbing all of those local rights, and not just the teams that were FanDuel mainstream, Main Street, whatever the hell it's called these days. I just call it bankrupt.
Zombie Main
But
Street. We call it
yeah,
Zombie Main Street over here.
yeah, exactly. It's getting the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets and the Red Sox and the Cubs and the Phillies on board. It's getting all of these teams that if they wanted to, they could go out and create a company among each other that I bet would have as many, if not more, subscribers than the other 24 teams that are out there. And
That
that
was
is,
actually in the show Running Point. That's
yeah.
what they did. Exactly that for like Boston, LA, and New York. It's about basketball, running a basketball team. They did exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I've talked with people in those organizations. They've considered it. Like
Mhm.
it's not out of the realm of possibility. And so in order to bring them in and have that all 30 teams package. So right now it's 1.8 billion for the national. I think that considering the NBA is getting $7 billion a year for its television contract, the idea that Major League Baseball could go out and get, I don't know if it's 2x what they're getting right now, but a very reasonable jump is a realistic possibility. And then if you go out and I think in aggregate, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but local television was at about $2.5 billion or so at its peak. Let's just say that they could go out and get $2 billion because this is a lot of content, and it's good content, and it's content that people want to watch. All of a sudden, instead of having $1.8 billion distributed among the 30 teams, you've got $5, $6, $7 billion, and you go from the 60 million or so dollars a year to 200 million. That's a pretty good foundation to start off with. And I think what the Dodgers and the Yankees and other teams realize, but don't want to admit publicly because it would be killing their leverage, the lower revenue teams have to matter. Because if the lower revenue teams do not matter, you don't have a league. You
Yeah.
don't have competition. You don't have intrigue. You don't have any of the things that make sports worth watching. And so if they are looking at this as owners should, which is as stewards of the game, because as much as the players are the foundation of the game, they are ever changing. Ownership doesn't change very often. And so they need to be the ones to chart the course in the right direction. And I'm not saying to ask a bunch of billionaires for socialism. What I'm saying is they need to understand that their business is going to be healthiest if every organization and every fan base is engaged. And ultimately, Travis, I think TV is the thing that's going to salvage this from going as sideways as possible. Because if TV is the financial solution here, are you telling me Major League Baseball is going to miss the 2027 season and walk into negotiations in 2028 with their fans hating them and try and sell it to Amazon, Netflix, ESPN? No, the priority here is very simple, and it should be, how do we make baseball as attractive as humanly possible to the people who are going to give us the money that's going to keep us afloat? And that, at the end of the day, I think is going to be the raison d'etre of these negotiations. There's going to be a lot of headbutting. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, but I think Major League Baseball can have its cake and eat it too. Right now is not the right time for a salary cap. Before you have any clue of what the revenues are going to be in television, why, if you're the players, would you ever agree to a cap? I just feel like there needs to be more information if the players want to take this seriously. And frankly, the players should, because there are a lot of smart people running Major League Baseball teams in MLB's labor relations department. There are a lot of ideas. Listen to those ideas. Don't just like throw something away outright because it's got a word attached to it. Cap doesn't make something evil. There are caps that would work for players. They're just not the caps that Major League Baseball is going to offer anytime soon.
Yeah, but
Jared, what's your take on that?
no,
Yeah.
what Jeff is saying, by the way, is 100% why it clearly, I think, sounds like Jeff agrees. I'm much more bullish on the way next year is going to go than I think sort of the typical rhetoric, especially see online, is.
Yeah.
For the exact reasons Jeff said. It's just not going to be in their interest, the owner's interest, to miss a season going into what they've already described as this existential negotiation.
Yeah.
The negotiation next year with the players, that's the appetizer. That pales in comparison in importance to the TV negotiation. They've sort of said it themselves, and which is why sort of anyone who asks me this, sort of caution, like, don't worry about what's sort of on the table in November and December. You're going to hear a lot about a salary cap in November and December. What's on the table in February? Because that's ultimately where this is going to go. This is going to go down to the wire. They're going to threaten to miss games. It's going to get to a point where, hey, we either make a deal now or we actually take games down. And then does the offer start to change? It's what happened in 22, right? It wasn't as contentious. There was no salary cap on the table. But suddenly, in early March or late February, after we all got back from Jupiter, and I don't want to have to relive that, suddenly there was a new deal on the table. And that's sort of what I sort of anticipate will happen again. I do think, Jeff mentioned too, like, fans are angry. And they are. And there's all this talk about parity. The question isn't parity. Baseball is, at least in terms of who wins the World Series, parity isn't an issue, right? Baseball's had more different champions than other sports. It's about opportunity. It's about fans feeling their team has access, the opportunity to succeed. And you look at other sports, and you look at the NFL, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They have access to a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and they have the ability to keep him forever and create a dynasty in a market where in baseball, you just can't really imagine a market like Kansas City or Pittsburgh sort of being able to sustain success, even if they gain access to a great player like a Paul Skeens. you sort of already know where this is going, right? 4 years from now, we're going to talk about Paul Skeens being traded and then probably signing with the Yankees or Dodgers, realistically. And if you're a Pirates fan today, like Travis knows the Pittsburgh market very, very well from his career, you sort of wonder, like, think about in the future, without radical reform, will there ever be another player in the Hall of Fame wearing a Pirates hat? You kind of argue like maybe not, because no one's going to stick around there long enough to build a career there. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's what fans are angry about.
So about parity there, it is really fascinating when you really think about it. The worst teams in baseball have a 40% winning chance and winning percentage, and the best teams are what 60, 65 or so. That is remarkable to say the least. I mean, you see the other sports in basketball and football. I mean, it's way larger of a spread there. And Travis, I think I interrupted you there. Please continue on.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, yeah, I think Jared hitting on the perception point is really important because there is a loose, relationship between winning and payroll, but it's player development, scouting. I think is still a lifeblood of any successful organization, but it's this perception of, is the game fair? And I've been around a lot of angry fan bases in Pittsburgh and Cleveland, so I'm very familiar with this. But yeah, they feel like they're going to Las Vegas and sitting down at a card table and they're playing against someone who's getting an extra card or two in their deck. And why would you sign up for that? Why would you invest in that? And even beyond that, it's the lack of, this time of year, you go months without like a meaningful transaction headline in the market. So in Cleveland, it's all about the Browns coaching search. It's about Cavs and they're in season, but you're just not. Bringing back Austin Hedges is not going to move the needle in interest. So I think, in addition to perception, the idea of there's just not enough activity and transactions in these other markets outside the top five. So I do think those in concert kind of weigh on the interest of, it's a year-round business, but not year-round interest in every market. And I do think that's another issue that would help just drive popularity and increase the overall revenue spend if you had more fan bases engaged and energized going into a season.
Now, you hit on a topic there that is, I think, something that I do want to reflect on a little bit here. How are teams really treating this? Because we've seen things like the Cubs right now look like they want one-year deals. They want to really lean into the lockout with as much of a clean slate as they can to prepare for whatever is next. And Jeff, what are you seeing right now, and how are teams, for the most part, treating this? What are you reading in the tea leaves of how the owners are signing guys and what their expectations are then for 2027?
It's been a really interesting winter because it's almost as if most teams are operating as if there's no impending labor war going on. Free agent contracts by and large, and we can look at segments of the market like starting pitching right now, where Framber Valdez and Chris Bassett, Lucas Giolito, and a dozen other like legitimate big league starters are still free agents, and we're less than 2 weeks away from spring training. But if you look at the market writ large, there have been 8 9-figure contracts. Kyle Tucker set a AAV record. Bo Bichette is going to make $47 million this year. Like, relievers did exceptionally well across the board. One-dimensional sluggers, 2 of them got $150+ million this offseason. So it's not as if owners are operating, at least as far as I can tell, in a way that suggests that baseball is going through some kind of dire financial crisis right now. Now, you look at especially the teams that have gotten their RSN money, taken away. You look at them and they're operating a little bit differently at this point. So the have not thing, like, that's manifesting itself. And yet, if you're the players, at the end of the day, the players don't care where the money comes from. They just care that the money's there. And the money's been there this offseason. But the fans look at it a little bit differently. The fans do care where the money's come from. And I look at the Cleveland Guardians guys who had $100 million payroll going into opening day last year. I believe they're a hair under $80 million right now. The Guardians won the division despite finishing 29th in Major League Baseball in batting average, on base percentage, and slugging percentage. And what have they done to improve that offense this winter? Literally nothing. And being from Cleveland and being on a text chain with my friends who I've been in a fantasy baseball league in since 1991 and talking baseball with them, they're just pissed. Like, they're pissed at the whole thing. They're pissed off that owners are allowed to shepherd franchises in this way where it seems like they really don't care. And that's what the Dolan family, and David Blitzer is going to be taking over, so he's going to inherit this, but that's what the Dolan family has fostered, the same way that Tampa Bay feels like Stu Sternberg fostered it, the same way that Pittsburgh feels like Bob Nutting fostered it. And I just wonder at what point the owners on the bottom end are going to be held as accountable as the ones on the top end. What kind of sport are we following where the penalties happen to the people who are trying the hardest, where the ones who are not trying don't get penalized in any way?
Yeah. I love that, Jeff. I need to remind you, this is a G-rated conference here.
What are you doing?
I agree with the sentiment completely and the emotion behind it.
Yeah, I saw your
100%.
eyebrows there. My bad.
I remember I remember in 2022, the sickening feeling that those who have the most control of the thing I love seemingly care about it the least. And that's how it felt. And it's just a horrible, powerless feeling that you do have. And I'm Jared, I know I interrupted you there, but
Okay.
it is real crux of this is just that these teams are capable of having success without spending money and without doing those things. And that in some ways does feel like a major part of the issue. But Jared, continue.
I know it's funny. You kind of look back now and like what the A's in the early 2000s and the Rays in the 2010s did, just gave hope to every small franchise to go, oh, we don't need to spend. We could just be the Rays.
Celebrate that. We look at Moneyball. We put out an article last year that we had a very good source saying that Elias was not spending in Baltimore, even though he had got the green light to spend from the new owner, but instead had this wonderful vision and just dreamed to be like the Rays, so they didn't spend. Well, and it's horrible.
Well, it's interesting. I was actually about to bring up the Orioles, and then you brought them up for me, which is great. Look, no one is necessarily arguing that the small market owners should spend like the Dodgers or can spend like the Dodgers. That doesn't mean they can't spend more than they are. And you look at a team like Baltimore, right? They went through an ownership change. They had a rough ownership situation, to say the least. David Rubenstein comes in. In 2024, they rank right near the bottom of Major League Baseball in payroll. I think they were 24th or 25th. Last year, they move up to 18th. Is that high? No, but it's better than 24th. Then this offseason, we've seen them go out and they sign Pete Alonso to a big contract. And I think right now they're somewhere around 15th in Major League Baseball payroll. Okay, so they go up from 24th to 15th in 2 years. Are they spending like the Dodgers? No. But a new owner comes in and has, at least to this point, said, we could spend more. We could be more competitive than we were before. Like the Orioles were terrible last year and they had a disaster of a season, and that might have scared people away. And they went on and got better. And this year you look at them and maybe they are going to sort of be able to compete in the AL East. Not that the Yankees did much of anything this offseason. They're basically running it back with the same group from last year. The Blue Jays just lost Bo Bichette. They didn't get Kyle Tucker. Maybe they have a shot. So what I'm saying is we have seen that a new owner could come in a small market and say, hey, no, we're not going to be spending like the Dodgers. But that doesn't mean it needs to be a race to the bottom either. And that little bit could be all it takes for a team like the Orioles to compete with the big market teams.
Yeah. And I want to also really take this conversation a bit differently away from the fans, because right now it's like the fans are striking, but we're not. It would be essentially something that would be the players versus the owners. And I want to highlight the perspectives of both here and what would drive this. Uh, so let's be clear right now. If either party could just say, "Hey, let's just agree to these terms and play right now," which side would be saying that, Travis?
Oh, to just run back the
Just run back.
just run it back. Well, the players, I would think would
Okay, so the players would be
they have
saying,
shorter careers, and
players are like, "This is fine, everything is okay," and the owners would want to redo it for what gain specifically, Travis?
well, how much time do we? How much time do we have?
What would be the
I don't-
biggest one that you would say
Yeah.
that like, "Hey, look, we want
Yeah.
to change this in it"?
Well, the interesting thing is which party is more united, players or owners. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but I do think the vote to agree on the CBA last time around was pretty fascinating. Where I forget what the exact, but it's like 22-8 or something. Where the pre-arbitration cohort of players essentially wanted to play, and the superstar did not want to agree to this
26 to 4.
Oh, okay. So I was way off, but
No,
it was an
your
interesting
sentiment
divide.
was your sentiment was dead
yeah,
on.
your
Yeah.
point is right. Yep.
So I think, players want to play, and most players have very short careers. Most players don't get to arbitration. Most players don't get to free agency. We think about the stars who get the big contracts, but the median player's career is very short. They need a second career after the playing career, and so yeah, I think players want to play. What do owners want? I do think in general there's a belief there's a greater business opportunity just overall. You look at baseball's revenue, it's growing, but it's trailing the NBA, the NFL, in part because of how media rights are. But I think there's a belief that there's an opportunity to grow this, getting more markets involved, and I think owners think cap and floor is the way to do that, and the players union does not. But yeah, I think owners want a more they want cost certainty, they want cost control to some degree, but they also want to grow their revenue pie, and they believe the best way to do that is to have, instead of 5 teams active in the offseason, have all teams active, have the perception of parity exist, even if the correlation between payroll and winning isn't that strong. So I think that's a rambling answer, but yeah, players want to play. Owners believe they have leverage because players' careers are shorter, and they think there's a better deal to be had.
Well, okay, so before I continue right now, we have Josh just has an image. This is a breaking news. I actually noticed that somebody updated their Twitter profile really quickly. Josh, can you put this onto the stage really quickly? He just told me that it's ready to go, and he's about to do it. Hold on one second. Josh Sperry, you got this. I believe in you. Send it up. Send it up, Josh. There we go. There it is. It's been updated to his Twitter profile. Jeff Passan says, "I F-bomb atomically." Thank you so much for that, Josh. So it sounds like they want to. Okay, so the players would bring it back. They'd be like, "This is great." Owners like, no, hold on. We gotta manage this. We've talked a lot about a salary cap. I want to talk about a salary floor for a second, because that is constantly brought up. And is it just as simple as that? It's like, look, Marlins, you got to spend 150 million, whatever it is, every single year for it. Is that a solution that would work, Jeff?
Oh boy. So in a capped system, when we talk about salary floors, the idea of a capped system is, yes, it comes with a floor as well. And Major League Baseball has offered no indication that there would be a floor of any variety unless there is a cap. And yet I believe there's actually like a reasonable argument for the league to test a floor in this upcoming negotiation, almost like a CBT on the bottom end, where if you don't spend enough money, then there are penalties that are in place. And those penalties could be draft picks. Those penalties could be international signings. Those penalties could come in any manner and variety of things. And that ultimately, Nick, like I'm working on a labor story right now that's going to be running sometime soon. And one thing that I've noticed in talking with people all around the league about this, there are a lot of good ideas.
Hmm.
And the good ideas that I heard, it germinated from this notion that I had. The difference between the Dodgers and the Mets and everyone else right now is that their owners are richer and cash is no bother to them. And the really the only substantive penalties in place right now at the top end are cash penalties. It's like every time you go over another threshold, yeah, you get draft picks taken away, but that's only for free agent signings, right? And even then, it's not going to be your first round pick. It's usually your second and fifth rounders. So it's just cash. And I'm sorry, but Steve Cohen finds millions in his couch cushion. Guggenheim literally manages $350 billion in assets. And so to them, the way that the Dodgers and the Mets are looking at things right now is if the only object between us and a huge advantage is cash, of course we're going to do that. Of course we are. And so I've been asking the question, what could you do to the top end teams that would actually make them think twice about spending and runaway spending, if we're going to call it that? That's a phrase that dates back to the 90s when the CBT was first introduced, because the Yankees were the Dodgers and the Mets of that time. And some of the ideas that I've heard of, I'm not smart. I couldn't have conceived of some of these, but, just a very simple one. What if every year, the highest revenue or largest market teams can protect only 8 players in the minor leagues, and those low revenue, small market teams get to pluck one guy, so evening out the farm systems. But what if you don't spend money to that low level CBT floor? You don't get a pick in something like that. I think the point is more, Nick, there are so many different ideas that are out there. And while, 99% of them might not work, if there are 1 or 2 or 3 that get these sides to detente, that get them looking across the table from one another, not as enemies, not as people who are diametrically opposed, but and not even as partners either, because I'm with Tony Clark on this one. I don't know if you can ever truly have a management labor partnership to the extent that Major League Baseball does, but at very least you can understand that you're both stakeholders in this, and that as invested as you are in your individual outcomes, putting some of that investment into the entire game and its well-being is every bit as important.
Yeah.
Everything Jeff just said is more creative than anything that's ever been proposed at the bargaining table. And I think that's right. Like, it seems like the only solution they ever have, we'll just tax them more money. It's like, there are other things you could do. Like, get creative, try stuff, propose interesting things like that.
I'm looking at the comments right now. Jay Cowdad, bizarre to me that they're trying to come up with new ideas instead of taking the best from the NFL, NHL, and NBA. The players don't want a salary cap.
Right.
That's a non-starter.
They will die on that hill.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: the public likes salary caps.
Right.
The public likes salary caps, though, from my perspective, for the wrong reason. The public likes salary caps because, number one, they are familiar, and number two, they are easy. And I understand sometimes the most familiar and easiest thing is the best to do. But until I see evidence that tells me that a salary cap causes, not is correlated with, a salary cap causes competitive balance to happen, I'm sorry, but I'm not just going to fall in line because something's easy or familiar. I don't think that's what's best for the sport. I don't think that's what's best for the owners, the players, anyone involved with it.
Yeah, I would say that also the salary cap seems like there's a system that is fair. Yeah, I think that's really, when I think about it,
Is it?
it's like, okay, cool. You want to plan out your team. You're going to go up to this as much as you can. Okay, so maybe we can do this or we can do that. As a fan, that's the joy of it, right? It's not just like, Guardians, spend money, please, or like, it's just like, hey, we'll just spend extra money and do that. And bringing up the point that you made, which is great, was just like, yeah, the penalties for these are cash. I would even throw in the fact that draft picks
Don't really matter.
what is a draft pick? You know, it's different in football or in basketball where those guys show up that year. You know, a lot of times the first round pick is a high
Nick, a
schooler.
draft pick is valuable because you know you're going to get them cheap for the first 6 years of their
Well,
career.
right.
There's more alpha to be found in the draft
But
and in international than anywhere
I'll
else.
push this the other way though. You make a free agent signing for a 1-year contract, you trade him halfway through the year and you get your draft picks,
Yeah.
right? It's not a huge asset inside of this. And really, to me, I think the thing that would make at least the fans happy is just creating a system that they can understand, that they can at least have the conversation and feel like their team is engaged with it and there are options and there are things that they can do with an understanding of what they will do, instead of just being like, I'm a billionaire. This is a business. This is not in my best interest. Sorry, don't need to do that. I'll still make my money. Ta-da, I have won. Let's go get some tea. And you know, I want to really pivot to the fun part of this. I want to hear some of these fun ideas. I really want this to be the conversation for the public, because what it has been in the past is just like players, how dare you, you know, money, 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 money. You can make so much money. Who cares? Owners are gonna be like, oh, the players are this and that. Instead, it's just like, hey guys, let's find this solution. And this would be really cool. And as a guy who absolutely loves systems, designing them and everything like that, how do you make the perfect picture and all? I would love to hear any sort of suggestions you guys have. I will start this, and I threw this to the Discord, the Pitcherless Discord, to just throw in random things on the tenets of this. 1, prevent one team from having so much more power than everyone else to go and get other players. 2, prevent teams from not engaging whatsoever and still being successful. And 3, no salary cap. Those are the 3 tenets I feel like we need to adhere to. If there's a 4th one in there that you think isn't necessary, please speak up now. But those are the ones that I'm working with.
Can I throw out this?
Yeah.
Why are we going no salary cap? Here's the thing. I'm just saying the argument that owners are operating on right now is they feel like they're more than 50% of players in Major League Baseball make the minimum, right? And if they were to raise minimums significantly, and if they were can they, I'm not going to say break the union, but can they convince enough people inside of the union, or has the union's messaging been strong enough to promote that solidarity? That's one of the stories that it's going to be interesting to follow. Like, are there people who are willing to speak up? Because there are players who think a salary cap system would be better. They're bound to be. That's not like, I'm not breaking news here. There are 1,200 guys, and like half of them are devoted fans of the NFL. And the NFL has done such an incredible job of tying the salary cap to its success that messaging has infiltrated their brain. And it's been the most difficult part, I think, for the MLBPA over the last year and change as the salary cap talk has really ramped up. How do we get what has infiltrated their brains and reprogram it?
Well, I mean, as Jared said, though, that is a non-starter, right, Jared? Like, introducing a salary cap, we would think in the CBA is just like, that's just not going to happen.
That's what it's always been.
Yeah.
And, I think there's leadership with the MLBPA that would probably resign from their jobs before signing a CBA that has a salary cap in it, not to name any names. But look, there were cracks. There were cracks in 2022. We alluded to this, but in 2022, the sort of top player leadership of the union wanted to keep fighting.
Mm-hmm.
They voted to not approve the CBA that was ultimately signed. It was brought to the sort of broader group of players, and they went sort of against their top leadership's opinion and voted to ratify the deal because, at least it seemed as if the sort of rank and file player was satisfied when some sort of superstars at the top were not. Now, look, the leadership of the union's changed. There's some more sort of younger players. Maybe it's a little more balanced group of player leaders than it was last time. But we've already seen that, yes, they unified and they're anti-cap stance? Yes, seemingly,
Until they
probably,
aren't.
until they aren't. Look, here's my idea. Guys, the Dodgers have to have Yamamoto pitch every single inning.
He would too.
They did that in the playoffs last year, and it kind of worked. But I think if they had to do it every single game, it would stop working. No, maybe.
There we
I
go.
don't know.
Solved. No, actually, I'm a huge thing of instituting a 6-man rotation and forcing, if you start a game, you can't pitch again for another 6 games. And that's just me. But that's a whole another topic we can do another time about pitcher injuries and all of that. I do want to interrupt this for a moment because we had a very generous donation of $1,000 from Mickey Davis in honor of Linda Davis. Says, in memory of my mother, Linda Davis, she was a huge Fighting Phillies fan. She fought the good fight against ALS, but passed away in 2008. Love you and miss you, Mom. Mickey, you have our love, and we hope that what we're doing today can help us stop this horrible disease affecting more people. So thank you so much for your generous donation, Mickey. And this is why we are here. This is why these people are ultimately talking about this issue in front of us, is to raise money for ALS. One, so consider making a donation at the link below at pitchbuzz.com/PitchCon. We're trying to raise $10,000 and we're already at 6,500. I'm sure we could get there pretty soon before the end of day 2 or day 3, as we have 4 days of this conference. I want to go back to proposing these solutions, and I'm going to throw the 5 that I threw at the Discord just quickly. And first, let me know if there's one that you actually think would be okay. They're kind of silly. And also your best solution that you have. So the first one is kind of what you were saying a little bit, Jeff, is to have a player champion. It requires every team to have at least one player on their team receiving X amount of dollars every year, as just kind of like, look, you have someone that you have to spend $50 million on every year. You decide one of them. That's it. It means at least 30 players every year are receiving that kind of contract. That might at least incentivize a little bit also the fans feeling like, look, we have this guy. If they don't have someone on that team, then that means that they have to go and get them. We can prevent super teams. This is number 2, from having 2 players among the top X annual salary every year. So you cannot have Ohtani Tucker on the same team because they already have the highest. They have the 2 highest contracts this year. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's right. 60 million and 64. I can't remember Ohtani's ridiculousness.
I mean, if we're talking like net present value, Soto's number 2.
Soto's number 2. Okay, so Soto and then Ohtani could not be on the same team. Maybe it's 2 within the top 5, something along those lines, to prevent that. At least, and all it does is just eliminate 1 or 2 teams in your negotiations. You can have number 3. Dodgers just have to pay, though. If you're, it kind of is how the luxury tax works a little bit. But forcing the money over to then go to the cheaper teams to pay for free agents. It has to be only for that, directly, just making sure there's an evener flow. If you're paying this, that means you know that these teams are going to also be in that too. The 4th is to increase the minimum salaries and or reduce the years of team controlled players, to again make it so that the smaller market teams cannot rely so heavily on their youth to not spend as consistently as they are, maybe having some sort of weighing process of that as well. And then the 5th is to create a mandatory salary range that is a cap and floor. This is going into your idea, Jeff, of maybe there is a salary cap that does work, that essentially takes the current average payrolls and then increases it, and you maybe increase it by 10%, and then every so on, you add a certain amount every year. You just constantly raise it, not just something that is currently as it is. And then you make sure that it's better than what players are currently getting so that they could be happy with it. And then it is always moving.
Can I jump in on that last one, Nick?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I did the math on this.
Yes.
It doesn't work.
Good.
And I say this because what I was trying to find in doing the math is, if you were to set some, because so all of this comes from, if MLB is going to propose a salary cap, the ceiling and the floor are vital numbers to understand how they look at this game, right? And so what I did was I took all of the final payrolls of last year, added the luxury tax spending for the 5 or so teams that were over it, and I tried to find a number that where if you had it at the top end, I did 280, and at the bottom end, I did 150. And the math, I think it came out within like $40,000 in aggregate of the total spend last year. So if you subtract, the $200+ million from the Dodgers and the Mets and the other teams that are above the 280, and then you bring up the floor from all of the teams that were under the 150, there is no way that the Miami Marlins, who are going to be spending $70 million this year, would ever go to 150 million. Right. And the Guardians, the Pirates, and so on and so forth. And yet, despite that being an impediment, there's also the impediment of there's still $130 million gap among all of these teams and between the top and the bottom. And are you telling me that the Pirates fans are going to be satisfied if they're spending 150 while the Dodgers are still spending 280 or whatever it looks like? No. And that's, to me, one of the most important things we're going to see this, Jared, the important stuff you were talking about in February and March, I think is spot on. But we're going to get a sense of what Major League Baseball believes a cap and floor system should look like before then.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the most interesting part of all of this is what are their numbers going to be and what are the levers that are going to be in place that makes MLB think maybe the union would at least bring this under consideration.
Entertain it. Look, at the end of the day, this is still a revenue problem. We could talk about owners not spending enough. We could talk about owners being cheap or whatever it is. But think of it this way. Look, we don't know the revenue of baseball teams. There's publicly reported numbers. They're not generally correct. Often they're probably wrong by wide margins. But let's look at it this way. Let's take a team like the Pirates. Whatever you think they're raking in profit after revenue sharing, let's say they are bringing in $50 million. And I would argue that's bad, right? These teams really probably shouldn't be making $50 million in cash year over year. They really should be break-even businesses. You make your money when you sell the team. That's sort of the bargain. But let's say the Pirates are making $50 million in profit, and they spend every single cent of that profit into their payroll. They are still like not even half of the Dodgers. So whatever we want to say about cheap owners, unless we're saying that every owner should just be running it sort of as a huge loss every single year, nice thought, not really realistic unless you're Steve Cohen, who seems to have no amount of money he's willing to lose. He'll keep losing, but most owners won't. Let's say they all run break-even businesses. The Dodgers are making so much more than every other team that it really wouldn't solve the problem. So until we find a way to get more money to the small market teams, perhaps at the expense of the big market teams, it's hard to see how anything really changes.
Yeah, Travis?
Yeah, that sort of takes us back to the RSN TV rights issue. And until that, and I do think one day that will become more balanced. There'll be more of a conglomerate of all the deals coming together in a platform or two. So I think that will solve it. And I do think, that's why the NFL and NBA have salary caps, because they share most of their TV revenue. And I do think one day, whether it's called a cap and floor, baseball will have a system like that down the road. When I do think we're headed to a path where people don't want to have 8 streaming services. They want to have consolidation of
the cable TV. Yes.
How many channels do you need to watch baseball this year? I mean, like 9,000.
Eventually, the consumer.
I don't think that's changing, by the way, guys.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah,
too much money. It's the same idea as before. It's
like professional sports leagues, they understand that the most valuable thing that they have is their championship series. And whether it's streamers, networks, or otherwise, they don't want to get into business with you unless they know they are going to have a Super Bowl, an NBA Finals, a Stanley Cup Finals, or in this case, a World Series.
Yeah. So we're coming up to the end of the hour here, and I do want to hear the best proposal that you have. It doesn't need to be this incredible long thing. This is like, look, if I were in charge of this, and I said, look, you're going to do this and you're going to do this, and it's going to be fair and good. This is what it's going to be. We're going to start with you, Jared. What is the proposal that you have for this?
Honestly, my proposal is you come up with some CBA where you make changes around the margins. Maybe you increase the luxury tax. Maybe you make some changes to revenue sharing, but you go out in 2028 and really try what they say they want to do, which is completely reshape their media paradigm and see if that solves a lot of their problems. Because I really do believe that if they get the TV thing right, it could, or maybe even should, at least put a dent into the disparity we're talking about. And then maybe 5 years from now, we're not talking about a salary cap as aggressively as we are now. I just don't think you could do anything meaningfully different in labor until TV is in a different place than it is now. And hopefully enough of the owners understand that. Don't tear down 2027. Make whatever changes around the edges you think will help. There are certainly changes to be made. And then go convince Amazon or Netflix to give you, 20 billion a year or whatever they're trying to get,
Hey, Travis, are you the same here?
Yeah, I think that has to be solved first. Ideal solution, I do think this gets lost in all this debate about billionaires versus millionaires and that sort of labor, how it's couched. But the median salary in baseball is the minimum. I mean, that's kind of insane.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it was the 24-6 number. Like, these folks want to play, and the minimum was kind of a secondary negotiation point in the last round, and I think it probably should be again. It's unlike you need a quarterback in the NFL to win. You need a superstar in the NBA. You can piece together a very good baseball team at the league minimum. Kyle Tucker is making 77 times a league minimum this year. You could field 3 baseball teams or 1 Kyle Tucker at the minimum. I mean, it's I think the union has to kind of figure out I think there's a fracture there that has to have some solution. That has to be solved. What is the solution to that? And if you go back to like the 94 proposal from the owners, if I'm a player today, you give me free agency after 4 years, a higher league minimum, but I have to have a cap. If I'm part of the vast majority of players, why wouldn't I sign up for that? And if I'm a fan and we all have the same rules now and I get to follow that and have more transactions, why wouldn't I be interested in that? I think that actually appeals to a broad portion of the fan audience, the player population. So it's going to be really interesting. But until the media dollars are figured out, I don't know. There's just still such a gap. Like, even Jeff's exercise about what would that look like. There's still a huge divide, and that in his cap and floor model. So I don't know, but I think there's something there in just addressing the divide between players' share of what they take in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point, that players do not universally feel the same way about everything here. And also that this is the whole TV deals really is what's affecting signings. Is like some guys are like, we don't really care, we're going to do this. And other ones like, well, hold on a second. We need to see where we're going to be after, of course, the landscape changes in the next year or two. Jeff, what is your proposal here?
Get all your ducks in a row and treat baseball with tender, loving care right now, because I'm serious. Like, it sounds silly when I say that. People will leave. I think that's what baseball needs to understand. You're in the middle of a renaissance right now. The greatest player that the game has ever seen is at his peak on a 2-time World Series winning team that looks like the great villain of it all. You have storylines, you have talent, you have exceptional play. Like, baseball's in a great place. Figure it out, people. You guys didn't some of them became billionaires through inheritance, but a lot of them did not become billionaires on accident. And if you are capable of navigating your way through the treachery of the business world, then surely you should handle this with care, because that's what franchises are, and that's what Major League Baseball is. It is an institution that deserves protection. And if you're not taking that protectionist attitude, then you're the problem, not the solution.
But what's the proposal, Jeff?
Nick, if you wanted me to lay out a proposal, it would take me another hour right now. I'll say that I'll say this:
Yes.
revenue sharing is the key to
Yeah.
an uncapped system. And the reason I said look at this more as a transitional collective bargaining agreement rather than a transformative one is because among the TV issues that are unresolved at this point, with expansion, with all of the other things, it feels like the next time around is going to be the one where if you test certain things this time and see what works and doesn't, then maybe you can have your complete change 5 years down the road when you're ready for it.
Well, Kyle Bland is offering his presentation slot on Sunday, if you'd like that, for the 1 hour to give your proposal. So just send me an email if you'd like to do that. But no, really, guys, Jared, Jeff, Travis, thank you so much for spending this time. I feel better, honestly, than I did before this panel about the 2027 season. It does make me feel more optimistic than I did, say, in 2020, when it felt like the owners just did not want baseball to exist for a year. And this is hopefully going to be not a panel that we have next year, and because it will be completely fine. So thank you all so much for being here. Really means the world to me that you guys took the time, and hopefully we'll talk soon.